What is it with all of the giant guns? Posted by u/farmwitch4275 over on r/hfy. If I did not directly ask for it, I would be holding my head in my hands and asking the gods why. The crazy bastards did it again. Only worse. A lot worse. Thankfully, this time it was actually a request. The Emperor, however, was not so enthusiastic as I was. He stood next to me, his concubines hiding behind his real form in terror at the human starship sitting in the dry dock in front of us. It looked like, well, since it's likely humans will be reading this, the starship is a slightly fancier version of the Imperial Gladiator class cruiser, only in the standard Darien Union color pattern and ballistic or railguns instead of, what were those called, turbo lasers? Doesn't matter, they probably have those turbo laser thingies around somewhere. I wouldn't be surprised at this point. The crazy apes. This one was called a Sentry Cruiser, and the humans who built it called it a giant Seawiz turret with star engines. From what I can tell, the damn thing was majority engines and ammunition, with a crew of 7 people. 7 for a cruiser. A ship class normally reserved for crews up to 500 members. This damn thing had only 7. Because, and I quote, "If we tried to increase the crew quantity, we'd have to get rid of too much ammunition." The Emperor looked at me and then at the ship with a marked absence of patience. I showed him the giant M1 Garand. His expression went from calm and stoic to "what the actual hell?" I then showed him the giant MG42, then handed him an enemy fleet admiral and the remains of one of the most deadly ships in the galaxy, turned into Swiss cheese. His expression became a mix of terror and rage. I am not sure which was more prominent. Now we stand in front of a giant turret with engines, ready for it to face its first test fire. The Emperor's expression was now turning to a mix of both loss of patience and loss of temper. The human engineers, hell, even the human admiral, were staring at the glass, salivating at the sight of this ridiculous beast. Mounted on the front, directly in the ship's front portion, where there should be a hangar apparently, was a gun with 8 barrels. I looked to my left, and the sight of an engineer with an absurdly terrifying grin standing just a bit too close made me jump out of my socks. Yes, we Eridani do wear socks, humans. Stop giggling. I know you are. I regained my footing and growled angrily at the overly excited ape. "Hey, dude, hey. Nice, huh?" He let out a disturbing laugh. "This is the GAU 80, an 8-inch GAU 8 Seawiz. Swivel mounted directly to the front for 8-degree motion." I just looked at him, put my head in my hands and said, "Why?" "Well, you did ask for a heavy defense satellite. What in the hell did you want? You explicitly stated you wanted a practical, self-sustaining variant of a defense satellite that you could use to defend your planets or critical locations. So, we delivered," he said. "How in the blazing..." The rest of my rant was purposefully censored by my translation unit. My rant continued for a full 10 minutes, most of it being expletives that not even humanity's barbarian ancestors would have used. When my rant ended, I looked around to find blushing cheeks, jaws on the floor, and the Emperor himself looking at me in absolute disgust. I looked around the room and held out my hands. "Well, it's still true," I exclaimed angrily and impatiently tapped my foot on the floor with my arms crossed. Does this thing even work? I mean, how can it work? The Emperor asked. Yeah, she's been test-fired before, but only for a few seconds. She is built with a prototype inertial dampening drive so she can absorb the recoil, the engineer said, pointing at the small domes in the ship's hull. I'm sorry, what? Inertial dampeners? I said. Well, yeah, of course. 8-inch shells at a 500 rounds per minute fire rate. We kinda have to have some dampening system to reduce and absorb recoil. That thing has some serious recoil. So we have to install inertial control systems so it doesn't fly backwards when it fires, he explained calmly. Both myself and the Emperor were wide-eyed with the prospect of humanity successfully creating inertial dampening systems for large-scale warships. And also terrified that this shit is what they did with them. Out of curiosity, these inertial dampeners, have they been tested yet? I asked. Well, yeah, every starship in the fleet has them. I think it's like Gen 5 tech or so far. They've mostly been used for general purpose ship movements. Normally we don't use them for this, but Big Dakka requires big bipod. That's basically what the inertial dampening coils are on this thing. Recoil absorption. It's essentially a giant bipod and stock, just really fancy. He said simply and used his holo screen to show us older technical blueprints of this one. Both the Emperor and I took a deep, frustrated breath. Okay, we will talk to you about the dampeners later. First, let's see this thing work. Does it have a target, or are you just shooting into space? The Emperor asked. Oh hell no, we got a target. These aren't just standard chemical shell casings. It's a full rotary Gauss-assisted network. It's a Gau 80-inch rotary cannon, he said. We both looked at him like we'd seen a ghost. Don't give me that look, he said, scowled at us and walked away to the control terminal. So, how this works is a Gauss-assisted chemical projectile system. First, a mechanism sends a jolt of electricity through the standard Gauss capacitor array in each barrel, then starts to spin. The chemical propellant ignites in the chamber, then gets sent out into the barrel. The Gauss effect then propels the projectile to 5% the speed of light. The small 8-inch slug hits the target with a force of about 8 kilotons. The engineer explained as he readied the firing sequence. Wait, kilotons? Aren't those the measurements for nuclear detonations? The Emperor squealed in horror. Well, yeah, the engineer just smiled at us, like it was nothing. 8 kilotons isn't much to speak of, to be frank. Most of our ships have warheads in the 25 to 35 megaton yields. That's just the middle distance though. The TSU New York carries a 185 megaton warhead in its missile bay, he said simply, and readied the console. All of the life and soul we still had remaining drained from both myself and the Emperor as our skin went pale. The Emperor and I shared a look of petrified fear and made a mental note to visit the temple to pray. To whoever we could think of at that time. Even Rakandus, the god of war, would be scared right now. So we didn't know who to pray to. Well then, here we go. Primary target, the Lumos asteroid field. Worthless for mining, but great for target practice for miners. A pretty good choice. And done. Okay, the engineer said as he typed on the console. This is Scabbard, ready for fire mission. The radio chimed. Scabbard, this is Coldheart. Fire mission clear. Strike location sent. Burst fire, 3 seconds. 3 volleys. How copy? The engineer spoke. A few seconds of silence passed. Copy fire mission. Location. 22A3.023B. Volley shot 3 seconds, sweep shot by 2 degrees, fire for effect, came the reply. The ship fired itself up, and we all felt the massive beast clunk loose from its moorings. It moved a few hundred meters forward out of its dock and aimed itself at the asteroid field. The barrel mechanism spun itself to ridiculous speeds. A perfect cylinder of whirring metal could be seen. The ship's rear engines fired the full throttle with the gun as they let loose the gates of hell. It was a solid beam of projectiles. If I hadn't known any better, I would swear this is a laser cannon. It fired 3 bursts in rapid succession, the ship moving barely inches as it spat out condensed metal alloy fragments. It suddenly stopped. Winchester, 12 seconds. 13 seconds later, there was no more asteroid field. They erased it out of existence. A bright flash of nuclear light, and then there was nothing but the cold, mildly irritated, empty void. Myself, the Emperor, and his entire retinue then proceeded to pass out. The next few months were spent in secret talking to the Galactic Council. Upon hearing the yields of their most powerful nuclear weapons and the fact that every human ship in the void had at least 1 warhead. The Sarania's longest and ancient enemy, the Rakandi, surrendered to the Terran Union. If the Sarani did not already have a treaty of alliance with the humans, we likely would have surrendered too. And before you ask, yes, I was allowed to push the big red button after I regained consciousness.